She grew up in caravan parks, and her first job was answering phones at a tech startup. Today, Vanessa Sorenson is Microsoft New Zealand MD. An advocate for girls embracing STEM and inclusivity, this tech leader knows what it means to be down and climb back up. So is she a game changer? Let's find out. I'm Gemma Acton. Welcome to Game Changers in partnership with Logicalis. Vanessa, I'm going to go right back to the very beginning because you've had such an extraordinary childhood. I think it must have played a really formative role in how the rest of your life panned out. What can you tell us about growing up?
Well, I had an idyllic childhood until about the age of 6. So typical 70s mum and dad, the daughter, the son, living in an area with lots and lots of young kids, and pretty typical in the 70s, mum and dad split up. But then what happened is over a couple of years, kind of the parents going, where are the kids going to live? Mum decided it would be a great idea to take my brother and I to Australia. And I remember at the time being quite confused why social services were coming to interview my brother and I. And, they're saying, look, do you feel safe around your mother and this guy in her life? And all we could think of was that amazing plane ride, going to a new country, imagine what it would be like. And what subsequently happened is my dad, did go to the courts and say, look, their mother's not really fit. She's an alcoholic and things, it's a tough environment. And so, looking back, I think even back then a lot of mums did get access to the kids, and that was kind of primarily how it happened. But then we get on a plane, we leave New Zealand, I'm about 8 or 9, and landed in Parramatta, so I went to Parramatta Primary School, and then pretty much every year we moved. So Parramatta, then we moved to Muswellbrook, went to school there. Then we moved to Cardwell, then we moved to Townsville. We were homeless for about 6 months. Then we finally landed in Warri Caravan Park in Cairns, and probably the longest duration that I actually went to one school. So there for 3.5 years, and I just knew that I would get out. I just knew from the age of 12 to 13, I just visualised a life for myself that had the house with the picket fence, the nice car, a decent job. So at the age of 17, I bought a one-way ticket. I flew back to New Zealand and I knocked on my dad's door and said, "Hi, I'm your daughter." He was like, pardon? I did ring him a few months before and said, "I'm coming home." Luckily he said yes. I've never pondered. Imagine if he said no. And so I haven't had your typical childhood, but that's where it absolutely springboarded my career and how I landed where I am today.
You needed a lot of strength to move through a childhood like that, which was very unpredictable and at times, no doubt, very, very difficult. Were you born with that strength, or do you think it was really born of circumstance, of you, every time you had to move, every time there was disruption, you just became more resolute in what the future would look like?
I would say definitely a bit of both. I think for me, I just knew that I just could visualise a different world. I think just being the forever optimist, no matter how bad things are, and I feel like that even today, when I have a bad day, I'm like, how bad it can be. When you've gone to school with no food, when you don't have those shoes on, you can't even pay school fees. I mean, when you've had nothing, truly is only greatness. And I think I always felt that at a young age. And probably most challenging when my mother had a child when I was 16 and, really sort of having to even leave her was really, really difficult. But I had to sort of step out on my own. And so I think, resilience, goal setting, and just picturing, pretty much the life that I feel I'm so blessed to have today. And there's no pathway. I always say it's like gymnastics. It's sideways, upways, downways. And that's pretty much how I feel my life's been.
Returning to see your father after all those years was not only a big personal decision, but it ended up being an incredibly important professional decision as well. Tell us about what happened next.
Yeah, so I'd always been a worker. So from the age of 13, actually, I had my first job in a bakery, in a drive-in bakery. And so, having to pay for myself to go to school and things like that. So I was always a worker. And yeah, I turn up on his doorstep, and I think literally a week in, he's like, man, you are so annoying, you have to get a job. And his next door neighbour had started a tech startup, and he needed a receptionist. And so, pretty much he said, look, we'll just go day by day. And it's really where I found my people. Back then, this is 35 odd years ago, really tech was in its infancy. And I remember actually being told I wanted to go on holiday and go to Fiji, and the boss at the time said, no, buy Microsoft shares. Well, who's the silly one now? But it was really, it was just such an incredible opportunity. And I found myself answering the phones, but really interacting with people. And I remember saying to him, hey, I'll cold call people. Like, I kind of like this selling gig. And pretty much that's what kickstarted this incredible career.
An incredible career where you were continuously promoted over a quarter of a century. Now look at you at Microsoft. But you still suffered from what you call the imposter monster. Where did that come from, and how do you deal with it when it springs up?
I think entering tech those 35 years ago, I wouldn't have even fit Microsoft or an IBM. You needed the MBA, the university degree. And so even back then it was, am I good enough? I'm very uneducated. I went to 9 different schools. I do not have a university degree. I left school at 16. And so that constant, what if they find out, has always been there. But how freeing when I finally actually really told my full story. And it wasn't that I didn't tell people. I just would never front with it. Because I thought, man, if they find out I'm not educated and they're going to realise I'm actually not that smart. And I don't think this is just a female thing. Everyone goes through it. But for me, it was really amplified because of my upbringing. I constantly get asked, what school did you go to? Thinking it's some flash school. I find it funny now but back then it really was, if you went to the right school, you sort of then had the networks and the people around you to make you successful. And so, I think for me, probably in my late 20s, I really had to do some work on this to really tone the voice down, to really start taking the space that, of course, they're not going to promote you unless you can do the role. But I think for many of us, especially if you're promoted before you do feel ready, it can take over your life. And I certainly found that quite a few times.
And Vanessa, did you have certain people who helped you grow to that realisation that you are worthy of these positions you kept getting promoted into?
Yeah, if only I listened to them. I think number one cheerleader, my husband. We've been together since I was 18. He's always been by my side. And finally, at the age of 53, I finally listened to him because, he can spot the things when I'm sort of spiralling, working those hours, and not only that, going, you can do it, you've got this. I mean, just to have that person with you as a woman, unbelievable. But yes, I have got such incredible mentors and actually people outside of the industry that I can really talk to. In fact, I've got one girlfriend, when we talk, you'd think we were arguing because it just gets so, we really get it out there.
Passionate.
But you've got to find those people, including role models. I think for me, coming through tech, there certainly weren't the women CEOs. There weren't the women that you could see, wow, if they could get there, maybe we could too. So finding them, I was very fortunate to, meet Barbara Chapman, who was the then CEO of ASB Bank. Teresa Gadding, 38, ran Telecom New Zealand. Like, there were finally some women that I could see, wow, they can do it. And then also just asking them, what's your secret sauce? And guess what? There isn't one.
But still today, tech isn't an industry that we see many, many women in senior positions. Unfortunately, it's still very strongly dominated by men, despite many good efforts to increase women learning STEM and also pursuing jobs in that field. What are you doing today, now that you are in a senior position, to change what you can around you?
I'm so passionate about bringing more women up, and one of the most proud projects that we launched a few years ago is 10K Women, which was to basically give free training and enablement, help women with networking, help them feel like they're finding their tribe. You know, even growing up in tech, you know, when someone gives you that, just be more confident. It's not something you can dial up. Get more networking. I'm not going to go and stand at some event with a drink hoping to talk to someone. So I really wanted to create pathways to help more women to feel like if they've got the certificate, they could go for that role and HR would let them through. And so that's what we created, and I'm so proud of it. We're now actually mapping how many women have actually got jobs in tech. And you're dead right, it's still far too vast, but I think all of us, you know, if we rise those tides, everybody rises, and I'm so proud of that.
Let's talk about the Microsoft partnership with Logicalis. What has it meant to you? You've obviously been a part of it as it's evolved over time.
Well, Logicalis really fits with our culture. Amazing, amazing people to work for and work with. And in 2024, we're our Azure Partner of the Year, which is extraordinary. That is no easy feat. But it's ultimately how we really want to go into that education area. You know, the wins that they've had with so many universities and just watching the how, and again, rising the tide. Because I think for a lot of people, even considering roles in tech, it starts at that younger age. Like if you don't have that inspirational teacher at school, we're missing people even before they get to university. And so that's what I love about our partnership. It's very based on a really great cultural fit.
What does it actually mean to be Azure Partner of the Year?
Well, it's tenacity. It's going out there and really challenging partners. It's doing phenomenal projects and migrations. And it's just been world class in terms of the how, what, and what they can do for others. You know, people throw around the word transformation, but actually Logicalis do it every single day with their customers.
Vanessa, you've been involved in some very important work in conjunction with Logicalis when it comes to education. One example that springs to mind is a project with Western Sydney University. What have you learned from these projects and how important have they been to your career?
Well, I love that one in particular. I mean, watching Logicalis from the get-go, just sitting with the customer, truly understanding what transformation looks like and seeing it come to fruition and the project going so well, and hearing feedback that now that they've moved to the cloud, you know, the leaders can sleep well at night. It's secure. It's giving the teachers out there more time, knowing where everything's stored. Like it's these sorts of things that are just every day that we get to see transformation just feels not only so good, but there's so much more to come.
Another big project you worked on in the education space was with Trinity Grammar School. For you, was it easy to get everyone on board from day one, or is there sometimes a bit of conviction that's required to make sure people understand that this is really in the best interests of all the stakeholders? Always.
I think this is where, you know, great concepts of design thinking and truly sitting down with Logicalis, them and us, like truly as a three-legged stool about, you know, how we invested in this project, how do we make it successful for them? And then more importantly, going back after the fact, which Logicalis is so good at, to say, actually, did we all do what we said we would? And so it's so transformation, especially the education sector, not only moving to cloud and a secure environment, but what AI is going to do. And I think that's the opportunity that I can't wait to see what they're going to do.
I think people look at the landscape, they look at AI and think this is all a bit overwhelming.
You've really got to constantly understand what the tools and the technology can enable. Because if you say, look, we'll get to that next year, you will be left behind. You know, for me, this is such a game changer in terms of where everything's going. And I really want all companies to embrace it and consider what they could do rather than what, you know, being fearful of it.
I think unfortunately women often feel a bit more fearful and a bit more imposter syndrome, as you mentioned earlier. What would you say to anyone, but any women in particular, who are considering a career in technology or considering studying technology but aren't quite sure they're cut out for it?
Well, number one, you are. You know, I'm certainly not your typical techie. And you know, and especially the new generation of female leaders, like they're more tech savvy than I will ever be. Everyone's got a mobile phone, so you are technical. I mean, and that's the weird thing. I talk often to my beautiful daughter who says, you know, Mum, no, tech just seems really boring. And I'm going, you know what? It's talking to amazing people like you. It's solving problems. It's creating great change. It's getting involved in projects like sustainability and skilling.
You must also need a break from all of this because much as it is fun and much as we love our work, it's also very intense. How do you take a break from it all?
Well, I'm definitely an Energizer bunny. Honestly, probably the thing that I'm so proud of is I really learnt to manage stress at a young age. And I definitely haven't cracked it, but I think, you know, that whole thing on a flight when you've got to put the mask on yourself first, you know, I want to lead the way I want other people to, and so self-care is so important. It sounds so trite, but if you as the leader are not doing that, you can't be there and energised for your team. So for me, it's as simple as walks on the beach, taking my shoes off and feeling the earth.
Vanessa, in your position, you have the opportunity to set team culture.
Yeah.
What's important to you in a team culture? What leads to success?
Trust, empathy. You know, I would never ask my team to do something that I wouldn't do. But everyone needs coaching. I think a lot of leaders veer away from giving really good feedback, and actually humans crave it. Do it from heart, be very empathetic, and you know, I think for all of us, it's up to us. We've all got the same 9-10 hours in a day. We're all busy people. We've all got choice. And I say, be bold and have a development plan, but seek out leaders that are going to give you the feedback, not what you necessarily want to hear, but things that are going to help you develop as a better person. And I hope that that's what I do for my team.
Vanessa, final question. From when you turned up that day on your father's doorstep and knocked to today, what were some of the key personality traits that have driven you along and brought you to where you are?
Look, have fun, smile, be optimistic, bring energy. You know, I think all of those things, I love that song, you get knocked down, you get back up again. You know, it's not been smooth sailing for me. I've had some really rough waters. I've been fired in my career, I've been pulled down by people, I've not always been supported. But boy, oh boy, I've lent into the people that can truly help me in those times, and that's what I recommend everyone does. Find your tribe, find your people, and that self-help first, I think, is just so critical because this world is not slowing down.
Vanessa, it's been an absolute delight to talk to you and wish you the very best of luck for whatever's next.
Thanks, Gemma. Loved it.